This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show with a long-awaited feature new film that tells the story of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton and William O'Neal, the FBI informant who infiltrated the Illinois Black Panther Party to collect information that ultimately led to the execution of Fred Hampton in 1969 by law enforcement officers. The film is called Judas and the Black Messiah. It stars Get Out's Daniel Kaluuya as Hampton, LaKeith Stanfield as William O'Neal, and Martin Sheen as FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. It premieres tonight at the Sundance Film Festival. This is the trailer.
I want to share something with you. Like the masses, I was in awe when I first laid eyes on all the things you are. I heard that speech. I knew we'd make noise. I just thought it'd be in the streets.
The Black Panthers are the single greatest threat to our national security. Our counterintelligence program must prevent the rise of a Black Messiah.
You're looking at 18 months for the stolen car, 5 years for impersonating a federal officer, or you can go home.
What do you want?
Get close to Hampton.
The Black Panthers are forming a rainbow coalition of oppressed brothers and sisters of every color.
Neutralize him by any means necessary.
America's on fire right now. And until that fire is extinguished, nothing else means a damn thing. Imagine what we could accomplish together. We can heal this whole city.
You ain't tell me it was gonna be like this. These ain't no terrorists.
We got a rat, man.
Does anybody else know about me?
No one knows your identity.
Are you sure?
We educate, we nurture, we feed, and we lobby. Perhaps we're here for more than just war with these bodies. We scream, and we shout, and we live by this anthem. But it's power to the people really worth their ransom.
When I dedicated my life to the people, I dedicated my life.
You get to go up there and talk about dying a revolutionary death because you don't have another person growing inside your body.
Anywhere there's people, there's power.
That's the trailer for Judas and the Black Messiah. The film has its virtual premiere tonight at the Sundance Film Festival. Will be in theaters streaming on HBO Max starting February 12th. It's directed by Shaka King, who co-wrote the script. Joining us now from Brooklyn. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Shaka. This is an opus. It is a masterpiece. Congratulations. Talk about why you chose Fred Hampton and William O'Neal, the informant, as the subject of this film.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thank you for the kind words. The idea actually was brought to me by two friends of mine, the Lucas brothers, and they reached out to me and basically said, we have this idea to make The Departed inside the world of COINTELPRO, and I just thought that that was a very clever vessel and kind of intelligent way to sort of Trojan-horse a Fred Hampton biopic and introduce the world, a great segment of the world who was unaware of, who he was and was, highly unaware of the Panthers' politics and ideology. And, obviously, as people know, there's just been so much negative propaganda put forth about them, the Panthers as an organization, that I just thought it was an opportunity to kind of correct the record and couch it in sort of this genre movie that would, go wide to the masses, as opposed to, just focusing on people who already were aware of it.
And your decision to actually to try to humanize William O'Neal, the undercover agent, showing the conflicts within him as well. It reminds me very much of another undercover agent in New York City, Eugene Roberts, who was on the security detail while Malcolm X was killed and who was a key figure in the Panther 21 trial because he infiltrated not only Malcolm X's organization, but the Panther Party as well. Also an individual torn in terms of his role. Could you talk about your decision to make William O'Neal such a key figure of the film?
Yeah. Well, for me, it wasn't hard to humanize him because at the end of the day, it's human beings who make these decisions. And, as opposed to sort of painting him as just this villainous character that everyone can kind of easily dismiss, I think, making him, more complex individual, it gives an audience an opportunity to sort of put themselves in that position and kind of and ultimately interrogate the choices that you make. Because to me, one of the upsides of making the movie about William O'Neal and Fred Hampton is that you're talking about two people who kind of exist on the polar ends of humanity. You know what I mean? You're talking about like the opposites, literally. You have a deep-seated capitalist ideology in William O'Neal, and you have a deep-seated socialist ideology in Fred Hampton. You have one of the most brave human beings of all time, and you have, a person who demonstrated incredible cowardice. So you have an individualist, you have, a person who is a master at building coalitions. And you have two people who have two very different definitions of power and freedom. And so it was just an opportunity to kind of explore, these two, like I said, polar opposite ideologies, and then put the viewer in a place where at the end of the movie, they kind of have to, ideally, they don't have to, but ideally you find yourself questioning, like, where do I fall in between these two ancestors, essentially?
You also spend a considerable time in the film exploring how Fred Hampton sought to make alliances with groups other than African Americans in terms of building a rainbow coalition, really, which the predecessor to Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition was Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition. Could you talk about that as well? Sure.
I mean, I think that was obviously one of the things that made Fred Hampton, I think the Panthers a threat overall, was their willingness to just coalition build, not just with, other Black-led organizations, but also, with poor whites, with Latin Americans. I mean, the focus of the movie isn't that, but it would have been, it wouldn't have made sense historically to exclude that. But it also, I think, kind of shows, in the movie, not to spoil it, but, it's when Fred Hampton starts to really build coalitions with those, white and Latino groups that he really, really becomes a true threat, to the powers that be. And, I think especially in a city like Chicago, that historically has been so deeply segregated, that was just like unheard of, So, I think the reason to include that is just a testament to his power, but it's also just historically accurate.
And it's so interesting to have you on, Shaka, as well as Juan, co-host of Democracy Now!, but one of the co-founders of the Young Lords. Juan, when Fred Hampton was assassinated in his own bed, along with Mark Clark, the impact it had on you and the Young Lords.
Well, yes. Well, clearly there were lords in Chicago as well as some of the young lords in New York who had worked closely with Fred Hampton. Specifically, Pablo Yoruba Guzman was working with him a couple of months before he was killed. So it was felt across the nation that Fred Hampton was already seen as really one of the leaders nationwide of the Panther Party, and so his murder really was a shock throughout the country. And there were many protests, not just in Chicago, but across the country against his assassination.
I wanted to go to two clips because what's happened this weekend with this film premiering at the Sundance Film Festival on the first day of Black History Month, I wanted to turn to Daniel Kaluuya, who played Chairman Fred Hampton, talking about the scene in which he delivers the speech to one of his largest, most diverse audiences just after coming out of prison.
Being in that moment and saying his words and seeing everyone, being in Cleveland, seeing everyone's faces, seeing that, it just felt like he was in the room, if I'm being honest. And it felt like I said, something's going through you and you're a vessel. And it was just, I don't really, if I'm being honest, I don't really remember the takes. I watched the trailer and I was like, I don't really remember that. So I usually remember takes. So I was like, I don't really remember that. I remember that, but I just kind of left. That kind of bit of me left. And I remember I'd go in between takes, like the background artists were like calling Chairman Fred. You know, it's like he was in the room. It was him, you know, because it was his words. It was his energy. It was his purpose, his message, his ideas. That was coming through all of us in that room. That's Daniel Kaluuya of Get Out fame, starring as Fred Hampton. Shaka, I was watching you and Questlove, whose film is also premiering The Summer of Soul at Sundance, having a conversation, and you talked about this moment that you filmed Fred Hampton, of course Daniel, giving this speech, and what that was like. Can you bring us behind the scenes, what he'd just gotten off a plane?
Yeah, he'd been doing press for Queen and Slim for a week, and so he'd been away from the shoot for a week. He hadn't played Fred in a week, and you know, he woke up late. It was the only time he woke up late, and I know he was nervous. And he walked into the church, and I can't express how that day is really. We had a lot of moments on set where, you know, we kind of felt confirmation that we were doing the right thing, but none quite like that day, because it almost felt like everyone was trapped in a time warp, and everyone was treating him like Fred that day. I mean, the first take, he came up those steps, and just the way that the crowd greeted him, it really did feel like, you know, Fred Hampton just came out of prison and was welcomed, you know, with open arms by the community that loves him. And that energy that they gave to him, he fed off of, and it just became it ceased to become a performance, specifically in that scene. It really became, you know, just a very real thing. It's an astounding moment. I also want to go to LaKeith Stanfield, who plays William O'Neal, the FBI informant in Judas and the Black Messiah, speaking in a Q&A with SAG-AFTRA.
I think there's just nuances to characters, and so I don't know, I always try to keep that in mind, that there was some love in O'Neal, even though he may have done things that we don't understand and agree with. I had to find that love, and it wasn't always easy, you know. I'd be crying and telling Shaka, like, yo, I don't know, what the is this? You know, especially when we got down to the scenes where I had to make a decision to like poison Fred or whatever. I was up about that. I couldn't even keep it together for the scene because I was just like, damn, you know, everything just felt so real. So I just had to find the truth in it and try to move and trust in that.
LaKeith played William O'Neal. What you want people to take away from this film, Shaka, and the significance of getting it out to this mass audience? A number of things. You know, I think one of the reasons to make O'Neal a central character is, to me, in a lot of ways, in terms of his storyline in the movie, about the dangers of being apolitical. And, you know, not only how it can lead to, you know, deep manipulation and, you know, destabilizing a movement, but, you know, William O'Neal's life came to a bitter end, you know, because of the decisions he made. They didn't just hurt other people. They ultimately hurt him, even though he, you know, made them in a very self-serving manner. You know, I think there's also obviously a desire to, you know, make it clear that the Panthers, you know, were largely motivated by love of each other, love of their community, love of their people. You know, and to kind of correct the historical record that, you know, these weren't like
terrorists, just individuals interested in, targeting white people and hateful of white people. It's just a total fictive. I think in regards to Roy Mitchell, who's a primary character in the film, and William O'Neal's handler, there's a reason why we kind of tried to make him complex as well, because I think that in a lot of ways, his character highlights the dangers of being a white centrist, especially, when you're a white person who, works for the white power structure, and it doesn't get more, you don't find anyone who does that even more so than an FBI agent. So
we have 5 seconds.
I think there's a myriad of things to take away from it, but those are some.